I've got something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? Something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Talk Gaming. Number 5, I believe we're on. I know my hair is crazy. Haircut is in the works. Not currently, but probably tomorrow. I'm well aware that I look like a shaggy dog. But nonetheless, we have some more controversial topics, edgy topics, I would say, that we're going to cover today. And it's mainly just because there's been a host of absurd articles written by fairly respected gaming journals and publications that I think are just outright irresponsible, absurd, and ridiculously stupid. So we're going to talk about those. We're also going to talk about a video I did yesterday, and this is going to be our first topic, our very first topic. Yesterday I put out a video on the LA Noire rumored remaster and how LA Noire is currently, according to an insider, looking at getting a remaster done for the Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch. And I basically talked about how this is nothing out of the ordinary, and it's actually pretty common. A lot of gaming companies are putting out, even hell, look at Skyrim. These big gaming companies are putting out remastered versions of past games to gauge and kind of test the water to see if it would be worth actually developing a title with the Switch in mind all the way through. Because there's a lot that needs to be done. It's not just a simple, like in Unreal Engine 4, where you just click a button and then move it, and then it's like, okay, now you're developing for the PS4. Okay, here we go. No, it's not like that. You've got to alter not just resolution, but also you got to be prepared for different frame rate settings. You got to be prepared for different texture resolutions, amounts of VRAM. You also have to be ready if the RAM, just plain RAM, is not up to par with what you see on the PS4 or Xbox One. Then you could see like the AI of NPCs having to be altered, which would be a massive shift and a massive undertaking to do. So these companies are a little more hesitant to develop on the Switch than they would be for a console that were just as powerful, if not more so, than the base Xbox One or PS4. But it's Nintendo. What are you going to do? And with this discussion that came up, in the leak, it was said that this remaster would not be, at least initially, coming to the PC. This remaster, done by, of course, Rockstar Games, would actually just be for consoles. And this is something we've seen from Rockstar consistently now, with Grand Theft Auto 5 not launching on PC for about a year afterwards, with Red Dead Redemption never coming out on PC. Red Dead Redemption 2, there's been no mention of a PC port or a PC release. If you go on their website, it shows the Xbox One logo, PS4 logo, and no PC. So with that in mind, it's gotten everyone kind of riled up talking about how PC seems to be consistently ignored by developers. And it's very frustrating to a lot of the members of the quote-unquote PC master race. Now, I have a PC, a gaming PC. I built it with my own 2 phalange holders. I suppose I was going to say phalanges, but those are just fingers, so I said phalange holders instead. But my own 2 hands, I built this thing, and it does a decent job. It gets the job done. But a viewer sent me a PlayStation 4, and I've been playing on that much more frequently, at least recently, simply because they had the exclusives that I was really interested in. They had Uncharted 4, they had The Last of Us, and Bloodborne, which were the big games I wanted to try, and I hadn't been able to yet. But thanks to those games, I was able to. Or thanks to the viewer that sent me the PS4, I was able to. So a lot of people are like, "Oh, are you just a PS4 fanboy now?" No, 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 no. I cover all sorts of games. I don't cover any one platform specifically. The reason I've been talking about like The Last of Us is because it interested me, and I think it creates an interesting political discussion. Another thing we're going to talk about this week, a tweet by Neil Druckmann. So all of this kind of comes together and into this discussion of pirating with PC games in particular, which is the thing that's thrown out all the time. The console fanboys say, well, if you PC players didn't just like pirate absolutely everything, then we wouldn't need to just do, console releases. And we also would probably get better games because then they wouldn't be loading them full of DRM crap and all this. And I think there's a major misconception in the world of piracy. There's two big things about pirating games that don't usually get talked about. Number one is it's incredibly inconvenient, and there's a lot of barriers in the way of the actual gaming experience when you pirate a game. Specifically in that, I mean, of course, disregarding the fact that the install is just harder, it takes more time. You would have to like disable your Wi-Fi and then after downloading the full package, then unzip it once your Wi-Fi and everything is shut off. And then you install it, but then you have to add in these patches and create rule for outbound and inbound network connections. And it's incredibly difficult, and especially for a game that has a lot of online elements, which is one of the reasons developers have been pushing online elements, you would have immense trouble really enjoying what the developers created and what they were trying to create with those online elements. A game like The Division, in many ways, is inherently pirate-proof because it's based on internet connectivity. So if you're not connected, then you don't get a huge chunk of the game. Same with, say, SimCity or SimCity was created that way specifically as a sort of DRM. But nonetheless, pirating is incredibly inconvenient. And the second big thing is that you don't get the most updated version of the game. If you buy a game on Steam or on PSN or on the Xbox store, you get the updates that come through from the developers, and they're meant to fix bugs, they're meant to fix whatever. They sometimes add certain features or things. And when you pirate a game, you don't get that. So you are always getting a worse experience, and you're paying a cost for it. It's not just like, I like lifting a copy of a game from the shelf of GameStop or something. It's not like that. It's way different. And a poll that went out asked people to say if they had pirated games in the past, PC games specifically. And everyone who said yes, they were then asked, okay, what was the purpose of pirating? And why did you pirate the game? Was it because you were poor, or was it because you just wanted to get back at the developer, or you were angry at the developer, or was it because you wanted to test out the game before actually putting the money on the table to buy the game? And what the overwhelming majority said was that it was either because they were poor or because they were testing out the game, or some combination of the two, which is understandable. A lot of people, they don't have the money to dish out $60 for a brand new title every month. They just don't. And so if Resident Evil 7 comes out and everyone's talking about it and it seems like a really great game, then they are told to, like, okay, well, you need to give us your money, but I don't know if I'm going to like the game or if it's going to be good or what. Like, I don't know. And Steam refunds is cool, but I mean, it's only 2 hours and it's kind of limited. So, like, can I try it out or have it like a demo? With Resident Evil 7, there is a demo. So people typically knew what they wanted, if they wanted to get the game or not from the very start. And that was a very well done marketing or consumer confidence, I suppose, method of attack, because it did. The demo showed people this game is going to be really interesting. So I'm going to buy it. I'm going to pre-order it because I know what I'm getting is going to be good. The reason pre-orders suck is when you don't have any idea where you're going or what you're going to get in return, but you still dish out the money and then you get a piece of crap. if there had been a demo for No Man's Sky that was really clear and obvious and showed you what you were going to get, then people wouldn't have been as hyped. But nonetheless, this big misconception is that pirating are these people that are stealing stuff because they just like stealing. You know, they're just taking these games, stealing them, downloading them, and taking the money away from the developer. When in reality, most gamers test games out and approach these games as, okay, I'm going to see if I like this, and then if I do, I'm going to buy it. And that's what the majority of gamers who claim to pirate games said that they do. They aren't just stealing the game, playing it, and then they're done. They technically steal it. They do pirate the game without paying the developer. But then they play it for a couple hours, see if they like it, and then they go and buy the full version where they get those updates where it's going to run better, where it's going to do all that. I know people have done it. I may or may not have done it in the past, specifically with Mad Max, because I heard conflicting things. Tried it out for an hour or so, and then I said, yeah, I want this game. And I bought it. And that's just how it is. But it's just one of those things where there's different methods of dealing with this. And the impact of this on the market is really hard to gauge. It's very difficult to figure out if there's a huge impact from PC pirating or if it's a minuscule impact from PC pirating. And if that poll is correct, then it would have a pretty small effect because all the people that are pirating the game, most of them go and buy the game anyways because they see, hey, I like this, I'm going to buy it now. And that's just how it is. So the argument that publishers like Rockstar don't, the claim that they don't put games out for the PC because of pirating, because they're like, hey, you guys don't pirate, and then we pirate, and it's like, oh, okay, nope, you lost your game privileges. You don't get Red Dead 2. Sorry. You're going to have to wait a year for GTA 5. Sorry. And that's just how it is. And you can't necessarily blame them. They're a private company. They can do what they want. But what I think it is, rather, is that there's a lot of convenience for developing for consoles. Just like there's a lot of convenience for developing for the Mac, for instance. And the reason for this, or for like iOS, for instance, the reason that there's a convenience to it is because you know exactly the hardware that you're going to have to deal with. Just like with Final Cut Pro X, I think is what they're still on. With Final Cut Pro X, the big video editing tool that Apple pushes on their Macs, it can render stuff just as fast as Adobe Premiere on like my PC, but on a Mac Pro or something that's less powerful. Why is that? Well, it's because of software optimization. The developers know exactly the hardware they have to deal with, so they can optimize it really easily and get the best results out of it, which is just naturally a benefit of knowing what you're dealing with specifically. When you're developing for Android, you tend to be dealing with all sorts of different models, makes, skins, screen sizes, and resolutions. It takes more time, takes more effort. And same thing with consoles and PC. With the PS4, if you're developing like Naughty Dog, if they're developing The Last of Us Part 2, and they know the exact hardware that they're going to have to deal with for specifically being the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, then they can go and for the entire development cycle for 3-4 years work with just one set of hardware. Instead of at the beginning of development looking at, okay, well, right now the 970 is the most popular card, but by the time we release, it'll be like the 1170. So we got to really think about this and figure out how we can scale the quality of the graphics and the frame rates and everything, right? It gets way more complicated. So with Rockstar, I think they simply try to simplify it, and they do release amazing games as a result. I'm not complaining. Lord knows I'm not. I love me some Rockstar games, but this idea that it's because of piracy that they don't do it, I don't think these companies are that stupid. I really don't. I think that they can see that there's a little more going on, and GTA 5 is still one of the top games on Steam, both in terms of average people playing it at one time and the number of people buying it. It's absurd. It's still like $60 on Steam. It's usually on sale, but nonetheless, it's almost 4 years old. Damn it. Come on. I mean, I guess on PC it's like 2 years old and almost 3, but nonetheless, it's there. But with all of this said, I'm not necessarily heartbroken that LA Noire won't be, at least at first, coming out on the PC. I've already got it on my PC. I got it on sale. I think it's like $10 right now. You should get it if you haven't played LA Noire. It's a wonderful game. I love it to death. But I can already play it in 1080p. Back on the 360, it only went up to like 720. I actually looked up a gameplay video for yesterday's video, and I was looking at them, and all the ones from the original release are in like 720p, and it looks so gross. And I'm like, how did we ever play this? This is so bad. Oh, it broke my heart for old Lukey. Like, the fact I played that and thought it was brilliant, it's pretty incredible how far we've come. But nonetheless, I'm saying nonetheless. I guess that's my favorite word today. I'm just saying it all the time. I don't know why. Don't ask me, because I don't know. But I'm not heartbroken about it. I've already got it on the PC, and it runs great, and it probably looks just as good on the PC right now, on an average mid-range gaming PC. Probably looks just as good here as it will certainly on the Switch, but moreover probably just as good as it will look on the PS4, PS4 Pro, or Xbox One. It's really not a very demanding game, which again is one of the reasons it's going to the Switch. Little 720p display. Basically, they could just do a direct port from the 360 and say it's a remaster or something and put it on the Switch. That seems to be what Bethesda's doing with Skyrim. They're not even doing the full remastered version of the game from last year. They're doing like this weird hybrid thing where it's the version from 2011, but after some updates, so it runs a little smoother, and they fix some bugs, thankfully. So it's like a version of Skyrim from 2012 is basically how you can think of it. But with all that said, piracy in PC gaming, I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I think a lot of it is just a matter of testing out games. It's really just not that big of a deal, and people say, like, well, it's not a victimless crime, like you're taking money from developers. If anything, it would be a way of encouraging sales, because these gamers who don't have money, who are in high school or something, or college, they're getting to test the game out, and they see if it really is a good game that deserves their money. They're seeing, oh, this game is really good, and I'm not even playing the best version of it. I'm going to go buy it. Whereas otherwise, they would have said, well, I just don't know what I'm getting, so I'm going to wait a few months and then buy it at GameStop used. So it's like $30. Like, that's, I know, because I've thought that way. I've said, well, I don't know what I'm getting. I don't know if it's worth playing it on day one, so I'm just going to wait a few months and get it used and pay like $30 less. I know other people think that way. I have friends that think that way because I think that way. And it's natural to think that way when you have very little money. So, if anything, piracy could be better for their business because it actually encourages people who wouldn't have dished out the money in the first place to purchase the game, if the game deserves the money, which I think is probably the reason they're most upset about it, because they want the money before the consumer can really decide if it's worth it. But nonetheless, see, there I go again. I gotta do some jumping jacks or something. That's all on the PC piracy thing. But it's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. I've been asked about it. There it is. All right, so the first controversial topic, I suppose, for the day is an opinion piece that was put out. It's not even labeled as an opinion piece, at least right now, as of the time of this recording, as they say. But it is an opinion piece. It is. It's an article off of Polygon.com, which is a big gaming news publication. I get a lot of stuff from there. And it is called Video Game Industry Prepares for Coming Possible Trade Tariff. And this is in response to our new president here in the U.S., Donald Trump. He has said in the past that he is not opposed to putting in trade tariffs on certain countries that alter their currency and alter things in order to get an unfair international trade benefit. And the big country that he calls out is China, as most people know, China, as he says. And this trade tariff would simply be how it works, like on the international trade level, in very simplified, super simplified terms. China does business with the U.S. and has their currency at a set rate with regard to the U.S. dollar. And as a result of this, the U.S. trades them certain things with that in mind, knowing that this stuff is worth this much in their country. But then in their country, they do some messy fiscal stuff and alter their currency so that their dollar is then worth more inside their borders. And it throws off the whole trade thing, and it creates a kind of imbalance in international trade, which is one of the things that Donald Trump campaigned on throughout the entire 2016 election, was that China isn't playing by the same rules as everyone else, and therefore they're cheating. And they're cheating this international trade thing. Problem is, no one had ever stood up to them and said, hey, if you keep doing that, we're going to put in trade tariffs and stuff coming in and coming out. So, like, you know, if you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. And this is one of the things that a lot of people were worried about, because they said, well, but if he does it, then that could be really difficult. He also said it about Mexico with building or reinforcing our border wall, saying that he's not opposed to something like a trade tariff if they do it. Now, the best way I can put this into perspective would be to say, to read The Art of the Deal, to fully understand what's going on with this and what goes on in international politics when the international leaders are competent. You have to read something like The Art of the Deal or a book similar to it in order to understand how these types of negotiations work. But on a simplified level, let me put it into these terms. We all had the tough guy in school, right? I was actually buddies with the tough guy in our school. His name was Caleb, and he thought he was all that in a bag of chips, and in many ways he was. He worked out a lot. I trained with him in MMA stuff for, I think, 3 years, and we were very, very good. You did not mess with us. I was a pushover, though, and I would give you food out of my lunch if I needed to, or if you really wanted it. I was too nice, but Caleb created this persona that he was the guy that you don't mess with. He was the tough guy, and he would talk mad shizzle to everyone around him if he felt he needed to. And I started looking around and people talking, and like on the playground. We didn't have a playground, but nonetheless, like if you're in metaphorical terms, a playground, you're talking with all these kids, and you ask, like, did you ever fight? Like, do you know of anybody that's ever fought the tough kid, the bully over there, like the guy that talks so mean and threatens you and all this? And they're like, no, why would you ever fight him? He's like the toughest kid in school. Why would you fight him? So none of you have ever seen him fight. Well, no, but you wouldn't want to fight him because he's the toughest guy in school. Well, how do you know he's the toughest guy if you've never seen him fight anybody, or if you've never seen him? He's only talking a big game. But that's the key. Whoever talks the biggest and the baddest is the biggest and the baddest. The best generals win wars without firing a single shot, simply because they have such immense power, at least perceived power, that nobody wants to mess with them. Nobody. In Russia, he goes, Putin looks at it and he says, I want Crimea. I want this big chunk of the Ukraine. I want that. And I'm going to take it. He reaches over, grabs it. Everyone else is like, well, but if we tell him he doesn't, then he might fire nukes at us or attack or start a war or something. So, okay, we don't agree with this, but we can't really stop you. Okay. That's the key. Putin probably would have backed off or something if somebody had stood up to him and said, but as a result of his perceived power, at the very least, or the perception of how far he was willing to go, he got away with a lot of stuff. Hitler got away with a lot of stuff because he talked a big game and had this perceived power that he was a madman. Now, it turned out to be true. But in the late 1930s, he says, I want all this part on the map, and I want this part of the map. And Czechs, you guys are screwed. I'm coming after you. He says all this. And he goes in, and Chamberlain in the UK says, oh, okay, well, just don't get angry. Just don't get angry. Like, here, take it. I don't, just, let's just get along. Everyone's friends. And as a result, he just kept taking advantage and taking advantage and taking advantage. And it's why Hitler is recorded as saying that the leaders of the Western world were little worms. And it's because they were pushovers, because they respected his power and his threats and wouldn't stand up to him. Now, this isn't to say that anybody who uses strong leadership is somehow Hitler. Do not get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. Strong leaders just tend to be the ones who are remembered throughout all of history. And so they are mixed in with the good ones and the bad ones. But they all have this innate gift of strong leadership and talking a big game and understanding what it means to win a war without having to use any bullets and just take what you want because everyone is so scared of you. It goes back to the Machiavellian thing. Is it better to be feared or respected? Both. But with this specifically, everyone's talking about trade tariffs. They're like, well, if Mexico doesn't comply, then there will be trade tariffs, which will wreck the Mexican economy. It'll increase the cost of certain Mexican imports to the U.S., but it'll be way worse for the Mexican economy, which is already having trouble. So Mexico should just comply. Otherwise, he could impose the tariffs and they'll be screwed. It's all about talking a big game. Trump right now, he's talking a big game. He's saying, if you, Mexico or China or whoever, EU, if you have unfair policies that do not benefit the U.S., we will act accordingly so that we get that. And we will threaten you. We're not just going to ask politely, can we please have good trade deals and get what we want and get it for a good price, maybe, please? They say no. It's okay, well, it's worth a try. That's what it's been for the last 30 years. Or maybe even more than that. But that's what it's typically been, is it's just been pushover leaders in most countries. Nobody's willing to actually say, listen, you're going to do what's best for us. We're going to do this. And if you don't like it, we're going to play hardball. And that's how it is. If you read The Art of the Deal, one of the big ideas, and The Art of the Deal, of course, being written by our current president, he said that, you need to always be ready to walk away from the table. No matter what you're negotiating, what the deal is, you need to be willing and ready to walk away. Because if you're not, you have no leverage. Deals are all about leverage. And when you're dealing on an international level, you have to use whatever leverage you can get. Now, for Russia and Putin taking, Crimea, they said, okay, well, everyone is worried that we're going to nuke them. So, whatever. And with North Korea, they're starving their people out. And what is our response? Well, he's a madman and he'll probably kill and nuke everyone in his vicinity if he has the chance to. So let's not anger him. Let's try to just deal with this in another more calm way. But it's because of the perceived power and the perceived threat. All Trump's saying is that which doesn't even make sense in this article. Let me see if I can find the exact quote. On Monday, Trump signed an executive order to withdraw from the TPP, which for the U.S. would have been horrible. It would have been absolutely horrible. The most recent poll I saw was so unbelievably negative towards the TPP. It was amazing. Even Hillary Clinton was against the TPP. She was for it for a year and a half before. And then when she saw how negative it was with the populace, she all of a sudden had a reawakening. But the TPP basically it's a globalist type of idea. And globalism not necessarily inherently being a bad thing, But the idea just being that we're gonna try to equalize all this among all different countries. Trump takes a different approach. He says, no, I'm going to do what's best for the U.S. I'm not going to, sign a bad deal if it's going to make it so Belgium gets better stuff, or France gets better stuff, or Germany or the U.K. gets a better deal, and we're slighted as a result. He says, no, I'm the president of the United States. I'm not going to put the U.K. first. I'm not going to put Germany first. I'm going to do what's best for my country, my constituents, which is what the president's supposed to do. Just like Merkel is supposed to put Germany first, just like Putin is supposed to put Russia first. It would be insane to think that the leader of a country wouldn't put his country first. That's insane to me. I've heard that said. People said, well, no, we're all members of the human race. We need to do what's best for all of us. And it's like, that's a great thought. But when everyone else is looking out for themselves and their country first, and you're trying to help everybody, you will lose. You just will. So this article from Polygon, it's absolutely insane. This idea that the TPP will somehow have a horrible, horrible effect on video game prices. And they call out The Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red, being a Polish company. They say that it's going to provide very, very big price increases or tariff things on this. And there's really no basis for it. I looked into it. I spent a couple hours looking into it, and there is no way that leaving the TPP and abandoning it and saying, nope, this sucks. If anything, for the U.S., it would better the prices. It would actually improve the prices for Americans specifically. So it's just outright absurd, and I'm very disappointed in Polygon for putting this article out, which really has no basis in reality whatsoever. With the Affordable Care Act repeal, it will negatively impact game developers. This article comes from ICXM.net, which they seem to have stolen a logo from Total Biscuit. Maybe he works for them. Maybe, I don't know. I couldn't find a staff listing that showed him there, but nonetheless, they stole a logo. It's just a top hat, but nonetheless, I need to stop using that word. It's even annoying me. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But this article, at least they label it an opinion piece, which I can appreciate, but the opinion is frankly stupid. They said that the Affordable Care Act, enacted by then President Barack Obama, has been effective for almost 7 years. Roughly 20 million people have gained healthcare coverage thanks to the ACA, and it helps American families get the medicine that they need to survive. Now, if that's not the most biased thing I've ever heard in my life, I don't know what is. Roughly 20 million people have gained health coverage thanks to the ACA. That's because it's illegal not to. The fact that there isn't 100% coverage in America is mind-blowing because it's against the law of the ACA to not be in the exchanges, to not be to not have one of these programs. And the reason for that is because it only works the way that the math works out. It doesn't actually work out in the long run, as we've seen with the premiums spiking, in some cases 150% in late 2016. One of the big reasons Trump won was because Obamacare started to fail right around the time of the election. And as a result of this, everyone has to be involved. The young people have to be involved. They have to be paying into the system so that they can pay for the old people who are more likely to get sick. And so they made it so it's basically illegal not to have this coverage. And if you don't enroll in these programs and in the exchanges, then you have to pay a fine. And that fine, it changes, and it changes how long you've been doing it. It's different per state, I believe. But as a result of this, people just said, well, no, the down payment is so high. It's like $1,500 and I'm 20. I'm not going to get that sick. So I'll just pay the $700 fine or whatever it is, and I'll actually come out ahead. So yeah, why would I do that? So that's what they do. That's what we do. We just say, I'm not going to get super sick and need a hip replacement. So all I'm going to do is pay the little fine because it's going to save me money in the long run. And the coverage actually isn't that good. We were promised when the ACA was initially put up that we would keep our doctor and that it would save the average household $2,500 per year. Both of those blatant lies. Just blatant lies. Even so much so that Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader, has said that, those weren't completely true. But it's because we just didn't understand the bill, really. You wrote it. You guys freaking wrote it, and you don't know what the bill is. Now, this isn't about just defending like Republican ideals or conservative ideals. I'm actually much more of a libertarian. I would consider myself a cultural libertarian more than anything else. But this idea that this in the first sentence, no, second sentence, first two sentences, there we go, that they already set it up as if the ACA was some brilliant thing that now, with the recent election of Donald Trump and his promise to repeal the law, the Affordable Care Act has been threatened, and so too have the lives of many in the gaming industry. What I can't even express. With the recent election of Donald Trump and his promise to repeal the law, the ACA has been threatened, and so too have the lives of many in the gaming industry. I have no words. If you don't see how absurd that is to say, I don't even know how to communicate it. To say that because he promises to repeal a law in a system that doesn't work is the equivalent of threatening the lives of people, much less in the gaming industry. How much of a stretch is this to put on your gaming website and to say that, oh, the election of Donald Trump is going to have a negative impact on the gaming industry because he's trying to kill developers? Are you, I don't even know. Are you just that like partisan and negative, or are you just that stupid to not understand what he's actually saying? I don't agree with some of the stuff that Trump says. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that the people on this site say, certainly. But this is just asinine. This is just so unbelievably... I'm going to get too angry if I keep going. So with this, threaten the lives of many. What I'm assuming they're talking about here is the idea that with Obamacare, he made it illegal to determine whether or not somebody gets coverage based on pre-existing conditions. So that's like a good thing. That makes sense. Like, okay, people like that. That's very popular. And the other thing is that allowing young people to stay on their parents' health coverage until they're 26 years old, which I think is kind of stupid. If you're 25 and you don't have a good enough paying job to get your own, like, pay for your own health stuff, something's gone wrong. That's just kind of how it is. I don't think you can argue with that. I mean, I think clearly you'd be like, I would rather have enough money to pay for my own healthcare. But nonetheless, it's very popular. And so the idea, what they're saying here is people who are like morbidly obese, somebody like Boogie2988, he was worried about this because he said, if Obamacare gets completely repealed, then I will lose my coverage because health exchanges don't want to cover me because I'm morbidly obese and I have very serious health issues. And I spend like $1,000 a month is what Boogie said on health coverage and healthcare items and drugs and whatever. Because of that, these exchanges would either have my money or my amount so high to pay, or they just wouldn't take it or take me in that I wouldn't be able to pay for my healthcare and I would die. That's what they're talking about here. That's what they're referencing. What they're completely ignoring is that President Trump has said on multiple occasions he's keeping those two things. Everyone who has health coverage and wants it will have it. It will just be more affordable. Actually affordable. The idea of naming this the Affordable Care Act, it's like naming the Freedom or whatever it was called. The Liberty Act, the Freedom Act. I think it was the Freedom Act. Whatever it was, back into the 2000s that allowed Bush and all of his guys to expand the NSA power after 9/11 to the point where they could watch and read American citizens' emails without their consent and all this. It's like, well, if you're against it, then you're against freedom. No, that's not at all what it is. If you're against the Affordable Care Act, you're against affordable health care. No, I want affordable health care. The ACA just doesn't provide it. It provides extremely expensive care, and if you don't want it, you're fined. It's illegal not to have it. And so Trump says, hey, I want to fix it. And before he even starts fixing it, because his head of Health and Human Services hasn't been confirmed yet, he hasn't even put out his official replacement program. And they're saying, going on such a stretch to say that this is threatening the lives of many in the gaming industry. I can't even get past this first paragraph without just saying, you guys are so unbelievably stupid. I can't even. And I know this is more of a political discussion than you're used to on this show, but I think it's important. You know, they're trying to shove political stuff into gaming, which it's just so blatantly absurd. If Trump said, hey, I'm going to ban all video games that are rated M, yes, we should talk about that. I will be outright against it, and I will criticize him until it's changed or rectified or whatever. But the idea that simply saying we need to fix a law that's broken, fix a system that's bankrupt, and that is actually hurting and is the majority of Americans don't like it and say it needs to be fixed, to say that that's the equivalent of killing people or wanting to kill people in the gaming industry or people, period, is so asinine and so irresponsibly idiotic. I am never going back to that site. And if I ever come across anything they do again, I am calling it out. So whatever that website was called, I'll put it up. Don't go there. They are absurd. Or go there. I can't tell you what to do. Do whatever. I don't really care. But it is an opinion piece, to be fair. But the fact that they even let it on, and it's one of their chief writers, I think says something. And that's not what their site is even about. That's like one of the first few things. The only political articles they've put out have been big anti-Trump slam pieces. And as I said, I don't love everything Trump does or says, but you should give him a chance. It's been a week today that he's been president of the United States, and you're trying to equate some of his policy decisions to wanting people in the gaming industry dead. It's irresponsible, it's stupid, and I'm frankly sick of it. So, yeah. On to something a little more lighthearted and fun. Other than that, I apologize for that. They got a little riled up, but it's so unbelievably stupid that I can't help it. But what I wanted to talk about for this last segment is contained in this packet of paper, which my poor little stapler could barely contain. And it's about Assassin's Creed, specifically. Assassin's Creed. I have always... Well, let me go back. There was a game that I really, really enjoyed. It was called The Saboteur. And it was set in World War II, and you were supposed to be this sort of assassin-like guy that races cars and goes around, does cool stuff. In World War II, and it had some cool art direction. Like when you were in the area of the map where the Nazis controlled, everything would be black and white, except for like blood, for instance. But when it was liberated, it would turn back into color, and it retrieved life, or whatever you want to call it. It was a fun game, but it tried to do everything. It tried to be Assassin's Creed with like free climbing and all this. It tried to be Grand Theft Auto with driving and the open world, and it tried to have a deep and compelling story, and it just didn't do any of those things well. It did them all pretty good, but it didn't do anything well or even great. And as a result, it turned out to be sort of a mediocre game at best, but I enjoyed it for the setting, and I thought it proved something interesting, that you could pull off an Assassin's Creed game in World War II. And this is something which Ubisoft seems to be avoiding and going to great lengths to avoid, as I made a video on discussing Assassin's Creed and why it hadn't gone to Japan, the same head of the Ubisoft development teams that's responsible for Assassin's Creed, he said that World War II, Egypt, and Japan were three of the most commonly requested locations for Assassin's Creed, and they were just, quote, uninspired and stupid. I would disagree, and it seems like they're putting a game out in ancient Egypt, so it seems like they've revised that claim at least a little bit. But one of the reasons people are excited, because it looks like they'll go to Japan as well, which a lot of people wanted. But with World War II, I started asking myself, is there anything that would inherently go against the idea of an Assassin's Creed in World War II? Is there anything that is inherently bad about it or that wouldn't work in it? So I looked up the lore. That's what this is. I looked up the lore of Assassin's Creed in general. This packet contains basically the entire plot line for the entirety of Assassin's Creed, from the inception of the Assassins down all the way through World War II and even the events of the film, which is kind of cool. They what I didn't realize was that there's even Assassin's Creed lore on like the JFK assassination and Apollo 11 and dissolving communism because the Templars were like, hey, this doesn't really work anymore. Just really cool stuff that they've thought through. And what I didn't realize was that World War II lore, the lore on Hitler, for instance, it's all based with in Assassin's Creed 2. There's actual like little clips and things that you can find in Assassin's Creed 2 which explain Hitler and whether or not he was a Templar and how all that worked. Now, with this specifically, let me find this particular passage. One of the reasons I was told that Assassin's Creed would not work in World War II was because of the lore and how controversial the story could be if they were to go through with it. And I was like, well, what is, like, really? Like, is it that bad? And turns out that according to the Assassin's Creed lore, World War II was a time of Templar excitement. Essentially, there was a joining of powers. The Axis and the Allies were actually fighting together, but against each other at the same time. While we do meet Winston Churchill in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, at that time he seemed sympathetic to the Assassins, but it turns out he, at some time between then and when he actually was running in World War II and was the prime minister, it turns out he was infiltrated by the Templars. So Winston Churchill, Stalin, JFK, and Hitler were all Templars around the time of the war. And as a result of this, Hitler started doing stuff and they all started kind of working together, and they wanted to do this so that they could control the populace and hopefully create a new world order. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, friggin' the Axis and the Allies both being freaking Templars, so they're fighting against each other, even though Hitler had his own motivations and wanted world domination, and the US was like, no, let's just stop fighting, guys, let's just stop. And Japan's like, we want all the water. It's convoluted, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, to be completely honest and completely fair. And as a result of this, they try to mix it in so that Hitler killed his body double in the bunker on April 30th, I think it was, 1945. But on his way out of the bunker, he took the apple and he was going to meet Churchill somewhere. But he was assassinated by an assassin right outside of his bunker before he could get into his getaway car or whatever. And it's okay, that could be a really cool mission to go and have to assassinate Hitler. Wow, that hair's bad. To go and have to assassinate Hitler could be a really fun thing to do. Maybe that's wrong of me to say, but I think it could be fun, a cool mission. But the idea of the Axis and the Allies all being on the same team, all getting along, but still fighting against each other is inherently contradictory and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I know if I played that game, I would be like, okay, wait, so the Germans are on the same team as the US and the Russians and the Japanese, and they're fighting why? Like, what? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's like, well, there's some great conspiracy, and you know, the head of the Templar Council or whatever ordered them to fight each other, but they didn't realize they were on the same team. But then it's like, well, why was Hitler going to meet Churchill then? They were clearly in contact and were getting along, but they're fighting each other. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I would say that's probably why they wanted to steer away from World War II. I think when Assassin's Creed 2 came out, and they had these little clips and videos and lore little factoids about Hitler leaving the bunker and getting assassinated, they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then in Syndicate, they're like, hey, oh yeah, no, we should have Lydia meet Churchill, and then he can say, like, okay, yeah, no, I'll totally do that, and you're an assassin, that's super cool, I'm going to use you. But he kind of forgot to mention that, oh, well, in like 10 years, I'm going to be a Templar. Oh, wait, that kind of, okay, so he was corrupted at some point, but then, because that has to fit in, they all have to fit in. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. You get into this really contradictory and really convoluted thing once you try to make sense of it. Part of the reason why the movie didn't make much sense at all, because it didn't make any sense. Because the closer you get to the modern day, the more insane the lore gets and weird it gets. Plus, not to mention just the controversial nature of having like Stalin, Hitler, JFK, FDR, all those 3-letter acronyms, it's crazy. Having all these people working together, then you get into all sorts of messed up stuff like, well, was friggin' FDR like aware of the Holocaust? Is that like, was he cool with that? Or was he just like, hey, don't do that, that's bad, oh no, okay, lots of dead Jews, oh no. Like, what's the deal with that? I mean, you'd have to address those things if you made the game about it. But to have it so like the US was aware and okay with it, then you're just pissing off all the countries. You're saying Russia was involved and was okay with Hitler. You're saying the US was okay with Hitler and Japan and Russia. You're saying all these things which get really edgy really quickly. And my guess would be they just don't want to touch it. They don't want to touch it. They're like, we should go to World War II and do a game on that, but it's going to raise such hellfire. Let's just go back like 4,000 years and do a video on a video game on ancient Egypt. Let's do that. And I'm okay with that. I think it's a good idea because I would like another Saboteur or a remake of the Saboteur or something in World War II that's in that same vein. I think it'd be super fun to climb like crumbling buildings during a bombing raid or something. That could be blast. But for the sake of Assassin's Creed, I just don't think it's in the stars. I really just don't think it would make much sense. According to the lore that they've already committed to, they'd have to contradict themselves again to make it make any sense at all. And by that point, the lore doesn't mean anything. So might as well just go back in time and do a video or do a game in Egypt. That makes sense. But that's just my 2 cents on that issue. But we're about out of time. This episode's been weird. I will grant you that. It's been weird. It's been filled with rants. It's been much more political. I'm sorry if that was triggering or frustrating for you, but you're an adult. You're mature. You can listen to this and agree or disagree and leave those comments down below. Can't hurt. And I'd also like to call out my Patreon, my newest Patreon. I'm going to start doing this where every week, I got to pull it up so I pronounce it right. Every week, there's at least one new Patreon donor, and I would like to thank them when the time comes and when I can, and call out the most recent one. And there's also going to be a little description down in the comment section below with, hopefully, if I manage it correctly, all of the donors and Patreon donors that we have. And if you want to give any money or anything, you can do that. I'm not asking for it. It's simply a way people were asking me, can I give you something? Can I help with the channel? Since this show is not paid for or is not it's not ad supported. That's what I wanted. It doesn't have ads. So as a result, I need funding a little, other ways. And one of the ways you can do that is through Patreon, but do not feel compelled or obligated to. Gijs, Gijs, I can't pronounce that. That's a lot of consonants. But Gijs, that's how it's spelled at the very least. Thank you for your donation and for your pledge to make continuing donations. Means a lot, means the world to me. Thank you, honestly and truly. And it helps make this show better and better and better. I'd like to eventually go live. And if we can get to the point where I can just pay somebody to come in here for like $30 for the hour-long show and just hit all the buttons and record it, that would be awesome. We could go live. That'd be amazing, but it can only happen with your help. So that's all I have to say. Yeah. But leave any questions, any comments, any concerns, any thoughts on today's topics down below. Anything you'd like to hear discussed on next week's episode, leave that down below as well. I love you all. Peace out. Love you. Bye.